Now, if you've just bought a DDJ-FLX4, you might be looking at all of these knobs, buttons, and controls and thinking, what on earth does all of this actually do? Well, don't worry, because in this video, I'm going to take you around the entire DDJ-FLX4 controller and explain what everything is called, what everything does, and most importantly, what you'd actually use it for when you're DJing. So by the end of this video, you'll be able to look at your controller and understand what everything does. My name is Blakey, I'm a DMC champion, and I've helped thousands of DJs level up through my online courses and YouTube videos. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing to understand when you look at the DDJ-FLX4 or any DJ controller is that it is basically split up into three sections. You've got deck one right here, you've got the mixer section in the middle right here, and you've got deck two right here. And the two decks are essentially duplicates. So in this video, I'm only going to explain one of the decks and the mixer section, because everything that I show you about this deck will apply to this deck. Now, the reason that a DJ controller is set up in this way is to mimic a normal club DJ setup where you've got one deck or one CDJ, a mixer in the middle, and another deck on the right-hand side. And the first thing to know, which makes this controller way less confusing, is realizing that these two sides are basically identical. These are your two decks, which control the two tracks that you're mixing, and everything in the middle is your mixer. And if you're learning to DJ on a DDJ-FLX4, I've also got some completely free Flex 4 lessons that you can work through. There is a link in the description if you'd like to grab those. They're completely free. Okay, so now let's talk about the deck section right here. Now, first of all, the big circular thing in the middle, this is called the jog wheel. And this exists to essentially mimic an old vinyl turntable. This right here is how you're going to interact with your music. If you've ever seen a live DJ perform a rewind or a spin back like this, they have done that using the jog wheel. You can place your hand on the jog wheel and interact with the track. The jog wheel is useful for spin backs, scratching, and even nudging a track backwards or forwards to line up the beats with the track on the other deck. So think of this as your way of physically controlling the song. Next up, we've got the play pause button and also the cue button. This right here is the play and pause button, and this is the cue button. And these are probably going to be two of the most used buttons on this controller. So obviously the play button will play the track, and then if I press it again, the track will stop. If I press play again, and then press the cue button right here, what's just happened is the track has jumped back to where that cue is set. Now, DJ software will automatically set this cue at the first kick drum. So this is a good way of playing a song and knowing that if you need to jump back to the start of the track, just press cue. And you can see in the software, the song has jumped right back to the beginning. Now let's talk about the tempo slider right here. So this tempo slider can move up or down. And what it will do is it will change the tempo of the track or the speed of the track. So if I move this tempo slider towards me, you can see inside the software that the number in the middle of the deck is increasing. And that number is called the BPM, which stands for beats per minute. And this number gives you an idea of how fast or how slow the song is. So when the tempo slider is in the middle, there's actually a physical click in the middle, which makes it very easy to put the tempo slider in the middle. And when it is in that position, the song will play at the original speed, which on this occasion is 125 BPM. But when you're mixing two tracks together, these two tracks need to be playing at the same speed or the same BPM. And that's why the tempo slider exists, because very often you're going to need to either slow the track down by moving the tempo slider away from you, or speed the track up by bringing the tempo slider towards you. So you can see right now the tempo slider is at the fastest position. So the BPM inside the software is 132.5. So the tempo slider is very important, and it will actually become one of your most used features on the DDJ-FLX4. Now let's move up here to the beat sync button. Now the beat sync button is a way of synchronizing the BPM of both tracks without having to move the tempo slider. Now, I'm not going to get into a debate about the sync button. Some people think it's cheating. Some people think it doesn't matter if you use it. But this button simply helps you match the tempo and even the beat position of your tracks automatically. If you're a beginner DJ, I actually recommend not using the beat sync button because quite often the software detects the BPM wrong. And if that happens and you only know how to use the beat sync button, this is going to catch you out. So if you're a beginner, I recommend learning DJing using the tempo slider only, because this is the proper way to learn. Now, these right here are the loop controls, and you've got a very big in button here and a big out button. And this is called a manual loop. So you can use these buttons to set the starting point of a loop, and then press the out button to set the end point of a loop, and then the software will loop that section forever. Let me show you how that works. So if I press in and then press out, so that is called a manual loop. So I've set the in point and the out point, and then the software will loop that continuously. Now, if you want to exit a loop that you're currently in, all you need to do is press this button here, and you can see that that loop has now turned off and the track will continue playing. You can also use this button when there is no loop active, and it will set a 4-beat loop that will be perfectly in time, which is actually a great way of setting a loop. It's just one button and it works every time. Let me show you. So you can see by pressing just that one button, that has set a perfect 4-beat loop, which will continue forever. And then if I want to exit that loop, all I need to do is press the same button again. So when there is no loop active, this button will set a 4-beat loop. And when there is a loop active, that button will exit the loop. You also have 2 buttons just to the right of that. You have a left arrow and you have a right arrow. Now, if I set a 4-beat loop again, watch what happens when I press the left arrow. The length of that loop has halved, and if I press it again, that halves the loop again, and again, and again. So the left arrow will halve the length of the loop you've currently got active, and the right arrow will double the length of the loop. So this is how you can change the length of your loop very quickly. And next up, we have the shift button, which is right here. Now, holding down the shift button essentially changes the functionality of lots of the buttons here. So if you take a look, for example, underneath the beat sync button, you can see it says tempo range. That means if you hold down shift and press beat sync, it will actually change the tempo range of the track inside Recordbox. And the tempo range is essentially how big a difference moving the tempo slider makes. So if you look inside the Recordbox software, you can see that the tempo range is currently set to plus and minus 10. If I hold down shift and press beat sync again, it's now set to plus and minus 16. And if I press it one more time, you can see it's set to wide. So now take a look at what happens to the BPM of the deck inside Recordbox when I move this tempo slider. It changes the BPM dramatically. And that's because we have this deck set to a wide tempo range. So in the middle, it's 125. And then if I move it down, it goes all the way down to 0. The best setting for the tempo range is usually plus and minus 6 or plus and minus 10. Now, if there is a little bit of text underneath the button on the controller, like this beat sync button, holding shift gives this button a second function. So think of this shift button just like you would a shift key on your computer. Okay, now let's go over performance pads. So the performance pads are right here. You've got 8 performance pads on each deck, and just above those pads, you have these 4 pads here. Now these 4 pads are the pad modes. And the one that you're probably going to use more often than any other is hot cue. Now a hot cue is simply a marker on the track, and you will be able to trigger that song from that marker using any of these hot cue pads. Now, because all of these hot cue pads are currently unlit, that means I don't have any hot cues set on this track. So let's set one. So let's set hot cue number 1 right at the start of this track. And now, as soon as I hit that hot cue, the track will start playing from that hot cue. Now, if I put my hand on the jog wheel to stop the track, I'm actually going to set hot cue number 2 from this position here, just before this kick drum. So let's trigger another empty hot cue, let the track play, and now I can trigger the track from the second hot cue, or the first one. So hot cues simply allow you to put markers all over the track wherever you like, and then you can trigger the song from that part using one of the hot cues. Now, I'm not going to go fully in depth on all of the pad modes here in this video, but there are some amazing options here. So you've got Pad Effects 1, and this allows you to trigger effects inside the Rekordbox software just by pressing one of these pads. So you can see inside Rekordbox that this pad is the flanger effect. So I'm going to play this track and then trigger that pad so that you can hear it. And this pad right here is an echo. The pad modes also give you access to some other really useful features like beat jump, which allows you to jump through the track by a set amount of time. And crucially, it will keep the song on beat and won't affect the rhythm of the music. And this pad right here is sampler. And this is where you can load in your own samples and trigger them to give your DJ sets a unique flavor. You can then hold shift and then you can access 4 more pad modes. So you've got keyboard, Pad Effects 2, beat loop, and key shift. Okay, next up, let's talk about the browsing and load buttons, which are just here at the top of the controller. So the browsing coder allows you to search through your Rekordbox library, and this is great because it keeps you away from the laptop and means that you don't have to spend most of your DJ set using your trackpad to look through your library. You can just use this knob right here, which is great. And then when you've found a song that you would like to load, you can load that song into the left deck by pressing this load button, or you can load it into the right deck by pressing this button. And these 3 buttons exist purely so that you don't have to spend too much time leaning over to your laptop during your set. So the whole point of this video is to help you look at your DDJ-FLX4 and understand what pretty much every control is there to do. But knowing what the controls do and knowing how to DJ are 2 completely different things. If you would like me to teach you the fundamentals properly and show you how to use all of this to build and perform great sounding DJ sets, that's exactly what my DDJ-FLX4 Beginner to Pro course is designed to do. It will give you a structured step-by-step path that will take you from complete confused beginner to learning how to DJ properly. If you'd like to check it out, then just click the first link in the description. Okay, now let's move on to a very important part of any DJ controller, and that is the mixer section, which is right here in the middle. Everything that we've looked at so far controls individual tracks, but this middle section, this is where we actually combine those tracks together. So for now, we're just going to be talking about this section right in the middle here. So let's start at the top. These 2 knobs here are the trim knobs or the gain knobs. And what these do is they control the incoming volume of each channel. And the best thing to do as a beginner is keep both of these knobs around the same level, but don't have them too high. I would recommend copying the position of them right here, because this is going to ensure that both of your tracks are most likely going to be at roughly the same volume. And this is very important. As a DJ, you don't want to mix in a track and it's a lot quieter or louder than the track on the other deck. So just keep these knobs at the same level. And then below, you've got these 3 knobs here on each side, and these are the EQ knobs. These knobs here control the high EQ, or the treble, as it's known. These knobs here will control the mid EQ of the track, and these 2 knobs will control the bass of the track. Now, the truth is, these 2 bass EQs, these are going to be the EQs that you use more than any other. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to let a song play and I'm going to adjust each one of these EQ knobs so that you can hear the difference that it makes. Bear in mind though, that when I adjust the bass EQ, You'll probably only hear the difference if you're using headphones. If you're listening on your phone or your laptop, chances are you won't hear too much difference when I adjust the bass frequency. But trust me, if we were in a club or a live event environment, removing the bass from a track is going to make the track sound completely different, and it's actually going to remove a lot of the energy of the song. So let me show you what it sounds like when I adjust each one of the EQ knobs. So let's adjust the treble or the high EQ. So you can hear that a lot of the shine has been taken out of the track. Now let's bring that back up. So now we've got a hi-hat in the track. So let's turn this down again. So that's made a huge difference to the sonic quality of the track. I would also like to mention, with all of these EQ knobs, I would very, very rarely, if ever, put these EQ knobs above 12 o'clock. Because when these are set to 12 o'clock, that means that the track is playing with the EQ at the original amount applied. So always leave these EQ knobs set to 12 o'clock and only ever remove rather than increase. Now let's move on to the mid EQ. Let's turn it down. So the mid EQ actually removes an awful lot of the track. Like, there's hardly anything there now. You can still hear the bass and the high frequencies, but take a listen to what it sounds like as I bring it back in. So the mid EQ is where a lot of the music sits. That's where the synths are, that's where the vocals are, and a lot of the body of the track sits in this frequency. Now let's take a listen to what happens when we adjust the bass EQ. So let's take it out. All of the bass has now been removed from the track, so a lot of the energy has disappeared. Let's bring it back in. Now, when it comes to real world DJing, like I said before, the bass EQ is the one that you're going to use most often. These knobs, all of these EQ knobs, they don't just change volume, they change different frequency ranges within the music. So really, they allow you to sculpt the sound into whatever you like. Okay, next up, let's take a look at the filter knobs, which are right here. Now, there are two types of filter. There's a low pass filter, which you can apply by turning the filter knob to the left. And then once you put it back in the middle, that means there's no filter being applied. And then if we were to turn the knob to the right, that will apply what is called a high pass filter. And there's a very big difference between these two filters. A low pass filter will take out all of the high frequencies from the track, and a high pass filter will take out all of the low frequencies. Take a listen. So I'm going to turn this knob to the left, which will be a low pass filter, which will take out all of the high frequencies. So once you put that low pass filter down quite low, you can only hear the lowest of frequencies coming through. And then if we turn it back up, you'll hear all the high frequencies come back. So that right there was a low pass filter. And when used right, a low pass filter sounds amazing. Now let's take a listen to the high pass filter, which we can apply by turning the filter knob to the right. Here we go. So applying this high pass filter will take out all of the low frequencies. So with that high pass filter all the way to the right, you can only hear the highest of frequencies coming through. So now let's bring it back to the middle. The filter knobs, when used correctly, can actually add some professionalism to your mixes, but they should be used sparingly. It's very easy to overuse the filter knobs. So my advice when it comes to filters is less is more. Okay, next up, let's talk about the Smart CFX button, which is right here. So if I turn this button on, that actually completely changes what these two filter knobs do. These knobs will no longer apply just a filter. They will apply Smart CFX. Now, if I hold down Shift and then press the Smart CFX button, you can see every time I press it inside Recordbox, it is cycling through all of the different Smart CFX. So let's go to Phantom Echo. And now what will happen is as I turn the filter knob, it will not only apply a filter, but it will also apply the Phantom Echo Smart CFX. And Smart CFX are basically combination effects, and some of them sound really good. So Phantom Echo, for example, is a combination of a filter, an echo, and there's a little bit of reverb in there as well. I'm going to play this track and apply some Phantom Echo, turning it to the left and then turning it to the right. And just take a listen to the difference in sound depending on whether I turn the knob to the left or the right. And because there's an echo there, when I turned down the volume, you heard the echo continuing even after the volume had been brought down. Let's put the knob back to the middle and I'm going to apply Smart CFX again, but this time I'm going to turn the knob to the right. And this time you'll hear that a high pass filter is being applied alongside the echo and reverb. So that is Phantom Echo Smart CFX. Let's take a listen to one more. So let's put the knob back to the middle. Let's hold Shift, press the Smart CFX button, and let's go down to Vaporize. This is probably my favorite Smart CFX. Vaporize will apply a filter, depending on whether you move it to the left or right. It will be either a low pass filter or a high pass filter, but it also applies quite a large reverb and a little bit of distortion. And I actually think it sounds quite good. Let's take a listen. So there's a really nice long reverb there, and it also pitches down the track. Let's put the knob back to the middle and let's do the same thing, but this time I'm going to turn the knob to the right. Take a listen. So there's a lovely tail on the end of that effect there. But just like the filter on its own, Smart CFX can very easily be overused. So just make sure to use them sparingly. So now let's turn off the Smart CFX and let's talk about the cue buttons right here. So you've got a cue button for the left deck, which you can turn on and off, and you've got a cue button for the right deck. Now basically, these cue buttons will control what you can hear in your headphones. So on the front of the DDJ-FLX4 right here, you've got a headphone socket. And headphones are very important because headphones are going to allow you to mix in the track on the other deck so that you can preview it, but the crowd can't hear it. So this allows you to line up the track in your headphones, get the mix sounding nice before you introduce that track to the audience. And if you would like to cue the left deck in your headphones, just turn on the cue button for the left deck. And now I'll be able to hear the left deck in the headphones. And if you would like to listen to the right deck in the headphones, just make sure the cue on the right deck is turned on. This knob right here will adjust the volume in your headphones. And this knob right here, which is the headphone mix, should be set all the way to cue so that you're only listening to the cued deck in your headphones. So pressing one of these cue buttons will send that track to your headphones. Next up, we've got the channel faders, which is simply the volume control for each deck. And that's these two knobs right here. So this knob will control the volume of deck 1 that's coming out of the speakers. And this knob will control the volume of deck 2 that's coming out of the speakers. Now, the reason that the trim knobs at the top exist as well as these volume knobs is so that you can use these knobs and put them at full, and then you can adjust the difference in volume between the tracks using the trim knobs. Now that's how I DJ, and that's how I recommend my students DJ too, because it just makes the most sense. Rather than maybe having one of these volumes slightly lower because this track is louder, I would actually rather put this volume all the way up so that they're both at the top when you're mixing, and then adjust the difference in volume between tracks using these knobs here at the top. This is just a much more intuitive way of DJing. Next up, we have the crossfader, which is right here. The crossfader is very simple. If the crossfader is all the way to the left, then only this deck will play out of the speakers. And if it's all the way to the right, then only this deck will play out of the speakers. If you want both decks to play out of the speakers, just leave it in the middle. Moving up to the top right-hand side of the mixer section, you've got the master level, and this will control the overall output volume. Now let's talk about the beat effects section, which is right here on the DDJ-FLX4. Now the first thing we need to do is inside the Recordbox software, we need to open up the effects panel, which is right here. Now the effects panel is right here at the top of the software. And to be honest, it's very clunky and crowded and isn't very easy to look at. All of the controls on the laptop screen are very small. But the good news is we can control all of that from this section of the controller. So all we need to do is look at this part of the Flex 4 rather than the software. Now the first thing to do is select an effect that we would like to use. Now right here you've got the effects select button, and if I press that, it will cycle through all of the different effects in Recordbox. And if I hold shift and press it, it will go up the list. So let's put it on reverb, and I'll show you what the reverb sounds like in a moment. Right here, you've got the deck select button. So if we would like to apply the reverb to deck 1, just make sure that switch is set to 1. And if we would like to apply it to deck 2, just make sure it's set to 2. And if you would like to apply the reverb to both decks, you can put it on 1 and 2. But I'm going to put it back to 2 because we're going to be applying the reverb to this track here. Now just below that, you've got these left and right beat buttons. And what this will do is it will change the beat value of the effect that you've selected. So you can see inside Recordbox, the reverb is currently set to 50%. If I press the left arrow, that will change to 25. And if I press it again, it will change to 10. And then if I press right, it will go back to 25, then back to 50, and then you can go up to 75. But for reverb, I would only recommend using it at 50 or 25. So let's set it to 25. Right here, you've got the level depth knob, and this will adjust the amount of effect that's being applied. Most of the time, this should be set to 12 o'clock. So that's where I'm going to leave it. And then just below that, you've got the effect on off button. When this button is flashing, that means that the effect is on. And you press it again, and when the button is not flashing, that means the effect is off. So let's press play on this track, and I'm going to show you what it sounds like with that reverb applied. So you can hear that reverb tail that the reverb effect is leaving. And that was with the reverb set to 25. Let's turn the effect off, and let's change the beat value to 50. And now let's take a listen to what it sounds like with the reverb set to 50%. There'll be a lot more reverb here. So that's a lot of reverb. So take a listen to what happens as I turn the level depth knob down. So that level depth knob is changing the amount of effect that's being applied. So think of the level depth knob as an effects volume knob. Next up, let's talk about Smart Fader. Now the Smart Fader button is right here. And what this will do is it will allow you to automatically mix from one track to the other, even if there's a difference in BPM, and it will mix automatically by simply moving the crossfader from one deck gradually over to the other. Now, frankly, this is not really real DJing. The Smart Fader is, in my opinion, a little bit of a gimmick, and I wouldn't recommend any beginner DJ to use this feature because really it's not learning how to DJ properly. It is quite a fun feature, but if you're right at the beginning of your learning journey when it comes to DJing, I would strongly suggest only seeing Smart Fader as a fun feature to use and not relying on it because frankly, it's not real DJing. Right here, you've got the microphone knob, which will simply control the volume of the microphone that you've got plugged in to the back of the DDJ-FLX4. And now let's take a look at the connections on the back of the controller. So you've got the microphone input right here. You've got the master output, and this is where you plug the cable coming from your speakers into. And then right here, this laptop and phone icon, this is where you plug in your USB-C cable, which goes to your tablet or your phone, or in this case, a laptop. And then this USB-C input here is just for power. So if you're using the DDJ-FLX4 with a phone or a tablet, you're probably going to need to also plug in the power on the back. And then on the front of the DDJ-FLX4 right here, this is where you plug in your headphones. To be honest, the input and output connections on the DDJ-FLX4 are very, very simple. The three that you're going to need to know are where you plug in your speakers, where you plug in your laptop, and where you plug in your headphones. And that right there is basically your entire DDJ-FLX4. Once you break it down into sections, you've got the deck, you've got a mixer, and you've got another deck. It's actually nowhere near as complicated as it first looks. The decks are where you control the individual tracks, and the mixer is where you combine the tracks. The effects section is where you add some flair to your DJ sets. The browse buttons allow you to select your music, and the outputs at the back allow you to connect to speakers and your laptop. So now that you know exactly what every button, control, and knob does on your Flex 4, the next step is learning how to actually DJ with it properly. So if you'd like me to teach you how to DJ from scratch, I recommend you watch this video right here next, where I'll break it down step by step. This video has already been watched by hundreds of thousands of people, and it will get you started properly. So watch this video next.